afternoon. Adam Story with ABC News. 7 people have been taken to hospitals across Western Sydney following a multi-vehicle crash in the Blue Mountains. Danuta Gazaki reports.
All lanes are closed on the Great Western Highway between Leura and Wentworth Falls in the Blue Mountains after a crash involving a truck and 6 cars this afternoon. The New South Wales Ambulance Service says the 7 people taken to hospital include a child at Westmead Children's Hospital. 3 people have been taken to Nepean Hospital, 2 have been taken to Westmead Hospital and 1 person to Liverpool Hospital. There are reports of at least 1 man with serious injuries. Motorists are being urged to avoid the highway between Leura Mall and Scott Avenue and use the Bells line of road as an alternative route, with police investigations expected to take some time.
The State Emergency Service says there have been more than 800 calls for help across the state due to severe thunderstorms overnight. The hardest hit areas were Sydney, the Hunter region, the Central West and the Southern Tablelands. Sydney alone received more than 350 calls for assistance. The SES says there have been 14 flood rescues yesterday and today, mainly people in cars trying to drive through floodwaters. Meanwhile, many households remain without power in Sydney due to the thunderstorms. More than 400 households and businesses are still without power in the inner Sydney suburb of Darlinghurst as crews remove hazards and other debris. Homes in southeastern Sydney and the northern beaches have also been impacted. The Prime Minister says Australians with average super balances won't be affected by any suggested change to super tax concessions. Treasurer Jim Chalmers this week raised concerns that Australia is on track to spend more on super tax concessions than the age pension by around 2050. Anthony Albanese says no decision has been made, but it's important to have a discussion.
There's nothing that impacts the sustainability of the system from punters out there who've got $150,000 in their accounts. That's not an issue at all.
The first home buyback offers have been made to flood-affected residents in northern New South Wales. Bronwyn Herbert reports.
The Northern Rivers Reconstruction Corporation's Chief Executive David Witherden says the first buybacks have been made, with more to come.
Our target is to have 250 offers on the table by the end of April.
The buybacks are jointly funded by the state and federal governments through a $700 million Resilient Homes program. Greg Florey from North Lismore is one of 6,000 households registered, but still waiting for answers.
Definitely forgotten and frustrated.
The Reconstruction Corporation says around 2,000 offers will be made for those homes at the highest risk.
New data from the Bureau of Statistics shows more Australians are receiving scam text messages. Here's business reporter Amelia Turzon.
The Bureau's latest fraud survey shows the percentage of people who are noticing a scam-like attempt is up 10% in a year to more than 2/3 of people. The biggest rise is in scams that are coming over text message, such as the headline-grabbing Hey Mum scam that's reported to have cost Australians more than $7 million so far. The good news is that Australians are getting wiser on scams. The amount of people actually falling prey to these scams is down around 1%. More people are also reporting sus attempts to authorities like the police.
China's top diplomat and Russia's security chief have held talks amid concerns Beijing will increase military support to Moscow. Here's East Asia correspondent Bill Birtles.
Wang Yi is visiting Moscow just days after US President Joe Biden stood shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine's leader in Kyiv. After meeting Russia's security chief, the pair expressed opposition to what they call unilateral bullying and a new Cold War, referring to the US. Mr. Wang's visit, 1 year since Russia's invasion of Ukraine began, is being closely watched, with Washington concerned China might start to directly provide military support to Russia. While not ruling it out, Beijing has lashed the US, saying its continuous supply of arms to Ukraine shows it's in no position to lecture China. Ahead of the Russia trip, Mr. Wang said the partnership with Moscow will withstand any changes in the international situation.
The United States could bar tens of thousands of migrants arriving at the US-Mexico border from claiming asylum under a new proposal. It means the US would generally deny asylum to migrants who show up at the southern border without first seeking protection in a country they passed through. To the weather for the remainder of the afternoon, showers in the east with possible heavy falls. There's the chance of a shower elsewhere as well, also the chance of a thunderstorm across the west and the northeast. Showers should ease during the afternoon in Sydney. Partly cloudy tomorrow, the slight chance of a shower, a top of 25. Partly cloudy Friday, the slight chance of a shower as well. ABC News.
You're listening to Drive with Richard Glover
on ABC Radio Sydney.
G'day, Richard Glover with you on ABC Radio Sydney. Hope you're having a good afternoon today. The PM promises no big changes with superannuation, but what of the 80,000 accounts with balances over $2 million? Do they remain in his sights? Also today... push to heat-proof our cities, and a visit to the place that's leading the charge. That's Self-Improvement Wednesday. And later, of course, online everywhere. A quick check of the traffic.
ABC Radio Sydney traffic.
Especially the problems in the Blue Mountains, which are slowing things down a lot in Leura. At Wentworth Falls, the Great Western Highway between Leura Mall and Scott Avenue, multiple vehicles were involved in a crash there not so long ago. About, I think, 1:30 it happened. But it has led the highway to be closed westbound. Now, the eastbound, we've got one lane closed and one lane open now. So lane 2 remains closed eastbound, but it's entirely closed westbound still. The Great Western Highway between Leura Mall and Scott Avenue. Bondi Beach, Campbell Parade at Curlewis Street, the lights are flashing yellow. And in Normanhurst, Pennant Hills Road at the M1 Pacific Motorway, a car breakdown there with one southbound lane closed. That's the latest.
You're with Richard Glover on ABC Radio.
Talking about this energy drink Prime, which is being promoted very heavily by these two social media influencers who are incredibly famous, it seems, among anyone under about 16. For anyone my age, you've never heard of them, but there are amazing shots of them with just hundreds and hundreds of young fans, for instance, outside the Today Show studios the other day. It turns out this drink they're promoting, Prime, has got 6 times the amount of caffeine of Coca-Cola, 6 times the amount of caffeine of a can of Coca-Cola. It also says on its website, should not be used by people under 18, and yet obviously all of the customers, all the fans, by just the evidence of one's eyes, are under that age group. And also it's pretty expensive and hard to get, maybe hard to get by design in order to create a kind of race for it. We heard from nutritionists saying about the dangers of caffeine at this level and saying that really it wouldn't be allowed, and except for the fact that there's a loophole by which if you label the product a dietary supplement, you can load it with caffeine in a way that you wouldn't be able to do if it was just advertised as a soft drink like Coca-Cola. 6 times the amount of caffeine of even Coca-Cola. Helen in Camaray says, yes, my 11-year-old son's peer group are all talking about this Prime drink. Apparently costs $15 a bottle. Some of them have purchased it. They are heavily influenced by the dreadful Logan Paul. That's the appeal. It's all nonsense, but clearly targeted at young, easily influenced boys who think it's cool. That's from Helen. And from Adam, my kids lined up at Woolies at 6 a.m. today to get Prime. I suppose it's at least getting them out of bed. But yeah, 6 a.m., that's the sort of scarcity thing that they're trying to promote, I suppose. Someone says this is heartbreaking. Talking about energy drinks, my niece died in her sleep after drinking one. She had an undiagnosed heart condition, which made her heart race. She was just 18 years old. Heartbreaking text. A high level of caffeine is the addiction hook, says Gaz, for this product to grow and keep sales. Nicotine and alcohol have worked well for other things. That's from Gaz. Yeah, it's just the addiction to caffeine part of it. And in terms of the banks and Peter Martin talking about the deposit rate being so low compared to what they're charging for loans and mortgages and credit cards, maybe we need to establish a federal government-run bank like the Commonwealth used to be prior to privatisation. That could add much-needed competition to the Big Four. Yeah, the more things change, yeah? 1300 222 702 is our number. If you want to text, 0467 922 702. Here on Drive.
Hi, it's Philip Clark. Join me Monday to Thursday from 10 p.m. for Nightlife. We cover everything from history to finance to the day's biggest stories. We've got everything you need to get you through the night. Monday to Thursday from 10 on ABC Radio Sydney.
I wonder if you're someone who worries that the coating on your frying pan is contaminating your food, potentially, of course, contaminating you and whoever you're cooking for. There's been concern recently with the chemical PFAS that has been used in firefighting foam and in other products. So what's the story with Teflon frying pans and other types of pans? Oliver Jones is Professor of Chemistry at RMIT University. He's written about this in an article in today's conversation. And before you start throwing out your Teflon pans, the news is actually pretty good, pretty reassuring. And Oliver Jones joins us here on Drive. Oliver, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
The Teflon, it is true that Teflon used to be a problem. There used to be a problem with Teflon.
Well, not quite. So Teflon is still used. What happened was that you used to use PFOA, which is a type of PFAS, to make Teflon, but that hasn't been the case since 2013.
So they changed the formula in a way that made it safer, really, right back in 2013.
Yes, I mean, I'd argue it probably wasn't a problem in 2013, but in order to be a little bit safer and take precautions, they stopped using PFOA in the manufacture of Teflon.
Okay, so but what if you've got a Teflon pan that is a decade old? Should you consider throwing it out?
Personally, I wouldn't. But if you're worried, if it's all scratched up and damaged, then you maybe replace it. If you're concerned, replace it. But there's not really many of them around, I don't think.
Mm-hmm. Okay, but in terms of more recently purchased Teflon pans, you still hear people say, "Oh, you must throw that out once the surface is damaged." You're saying that's kind of an old news attitude.
Yes.
Because of the change yeah.
Well, I'm saying if you've got sometimes people say there's little black flecks coming off into their food and they don't want to eat that. Well, that's sort of a reasonable attitude. You don't want to be serving food with particles in it, but they actually probably just pass straight through anyway. Mm-hmm. So if you have got a damaged lining, yeah, by all means replace it, but it's probably not a health problem.
Okay, and the way they make Teflon now is safe. It doesn't have these PFAS chemicals in it.
Well, not quite. So Teflon is the trade name for PTFE, which is itself a PFAS. But it's not one of the ones that are really... There's a bit of a difference between PFAS in kitchen materials and PFAS in heavily contaminated sites, such as, near firefighting foams, contaminating water, etc. Mm-hmm. So we have to be aware that it's two different situations.
And in terms of a well-made modern pan, it's not the same as living in a town where the firefighting foam has been used.
No, it's not. And we have to remember that Teflon's been around since the 1940s, and it's been used in pans since about that time, and many other products, and we're all still here.
Mm. Now, let's stay talking about non-stick pans for a while. Some of them are Teflon, but the others are titanium ceramic coatings. What are they, and are they safe as well?
Yeah, they're perfectly safe. So there's actually two different types of ceramic pans. Most of them are sort of a metal base with a ceramic coating, and there's other ones that are just pure ceramics.
And either way, that's fine?
Yeah, I've read a few reports online where people were saying potentially the lining could come off, but I'm a bit dubious about those personally. Mm-hmm.
Let me ask you about a few other things. I've heard people say, and again, this might be old news, but I've heard people say they're worried about aluminium pans. Things like teapots, for instance, that you could sometimes find an aluminium teapot. People were worried that there might be a link with dementia.
Yeah, that's another sort of chemical myth. But actually, even the Alzheimer's Association deems that a myth. So there have been concerns since about, I think, dates back to about the 1960s, where people thought this might be a problem, but it's been disproved quite a while ago.
In fact, it seems to be based on a 1965 study involving rats and large amounts of aluminium that was never really stood up.
Yes, I think it was rabbits actually, but they thought if they fed rabbits large amounts of aluminium that they developed these sort of tangles in their brain that looked a bit like Alzheimer's symptoms, and therefore that sort of morphed into aluminium causes Alzheimer's, which then morphed to anything made of aluminium that you might touch causes Alzheimer's. So people started avoiding pans and cans and all sorts of stuff, but that association was then proven to be a mistake. So, even all the Alzheimer's and dementia associations don't say, they don't think it's a problem.
Okay, so aluminium fine, Teflon fine. What about copper? Because copper sounds like it could be dangerous, and yet copper cookware is actually very trendy.
Yeah, there's something about copper sort of glistening away on the shelf. It looks very nice. Copper's used a lot in cooking in pans because it heats up sort of smoothly and evenly, so it's very easy to control the temperature, particularly if you need a fine temperature control. So that's why you see a lot in professional kitchens. again, it's sort of similar to the concerns about aluminium. People think that copper might come off into your food and you'll get a high dose of copper. And copper is one of these things that you need some of it, but too much is bad for you, and it can make you feel nauseous. And there's various sort of excess copper diseases you can get, but those it's super that you won't get that much from a copper pan, right? You have to be eating huge amounts of copper for a long period of time.
And most of the copper pans have linings, don't they, to stop you?
Yes, quite a few of them will have most of them have this lining, which doesn't. So the food's isolated from the copper anyway.
What about pewter? In a way that will alert you to how odd people were when I was a young man. I used to be bought these copper beer mugs, pewter beer mugs for my birthday by my godfather. And I've still got a selection of them from 1 year old, 2 years old, 3 years old. But then I read that pewter is terrible because it's got lead in it.
Well, modern pewter is, it depends how old it is. Right? I think in the distant past, pewter did have small amounts of lead in it, which isn't obviously very good for you. But that's not been true for, goodness knows how long. Mm-hmm. So modern pewter is lead-free.
Okay, but maybe I'll steer clear of the beer mugs that were given to me in 1958. Maybe they're old enough.
Sort of old decorative ones, they're probably, yes.
But maybe they're old enough. The other thing that a lot of people are into these days are cast iron, if you can afford it. Those beautiful French cooking pots, and they Quizettes and so forth. I think there's some cheaper brands, but that sort of thing, are they safe?
Yes, nothing wrong with. Pretty they're heavy. Sometimes they don't heat up as well as other pans, and they're harder to clean, but they're perfectly safe.
Mm-hmm. And finally, a question without warning on the text. Would you put the Teflon pan into the dishwasher? Does that affect it?
That's a good question. So it depends a bit on the temperature of your dishwasher. Generally, you wouldn't be washing Teflon pans in a dishwasher. I can't imagine why you do that, actually. But
well, because it's easier than doing it yourself, Oliver.
Well, yes, but you might damage them. I mean, there's two things. So Teflon is stable up until about, I think it's 250 degrees C. If you heat it consistently above that level, you can start to get some fumes coming off, which aren't good for you. And there's been some, if your dishwasher's operating above 250 degrees C, you might get some damage. And then when you open it, the fumes you might breathe the fumes in. But again, it would be a very low dose even if you did do that. Mm-hmm. But personally, I wouldn't recommend putting Teflon pans in the dishwasher because they're not stick. The whole point is to be able to wipe them clean.
Yes, that's right. They should be quite easy to wipe clean, and the whole point is you don't have to put so much olive oil and so forth in the pan to begin with. Well, it's nice to talk about chemistry and about chemicals and all of that, and to have the conclusion actually we're pretty safe.
No, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, good on you, Oliver. Oliver Jones is Professor of Chemistry at RMIT University, saying that a lot of the questions about Teflon, well, he didn't really think there were much of a problem anyway, but the formula change back in 2013 became safer. And certainly in terms of aluminium, that the fear about that dates back to a redundant study from 1965, when the bunny rabbits were served far too much aluminium for their own good. It's currently 18 minutes past 4 here on ABC Radio Sydney. Now, I wonder if you saw some of that incredible lightning last night. Over 22,000 lightning strikes hit within 100 kilometres of Sydney last night, with the North Shore, northern beaches and eastern suburbs copping the worst of it. Some places recorded more than 100 mil of rain, with Terry Hills in Sydney's north getting 121 millimetres. Jenny Parks is the SES Deputy Unit Commander for Warringah Pittwater and has been on the ground during the clean-up today and joins us here on Drive. Jenny, good afternoon.
Hi, Richard.
Can you describe some of the scenes you've seen?
Well, there's been a bit of wind, which has brought some tree branches and some big trees down all over the place. But most of the jobs have been water coming into people's homes.
Mm. Now, the trees that have come down, they're mainly over roads. They're not into houses, into buildings?
We've had all sorts. So with the SES, we only go in where there's emergency access is blocked or for property protection. So if a tree is threatening to fall onto a house. So there's some of those that we haven't been able to do today, but we've done as many as we could. All the ones that have come down over driveways, for example, where they've been blocking access into the house, we've done those.
Wow, that's a lot of work because there were a lot of them, weren't there?
Yeah, there sure were.
Yeah, I think 820 incidents across the state, 356 in Sydney Metro and 14 flood rescues. The trees are a combination, obviously, of the wet ground, the sodden ground, and then you get wind.
Yes, that's right. And there was a fair bit of wind last night with those storms.
Mm-hmm. Downed power lines as well, I read.
Yeah, we had a couple of jobs there where we had to wait for Ausgrid to come in and turn off the power to the homes before we could go in and remove tree branches.
Mm. And how many volunteers did you have out there on the field?
Last night there were 5 in my team and 5 again today. Across the whole state, I have no idea, but it would be a pretty high number.
Okay, and because this all came on, I mean, I know there were a bit of warnings that it might be a big storm, but I think it was bigger than anyone thought. So for the volunteers, describe the process. You just get rung up at home and suddenly you're running in, do you?
Well, last night was actually our unit meeting, so we had most people here on site ready for the meeting. We were supposed to be doing some training on how to use pumps. And in the end, that got cancelled, and we went out and actually did some real pump work.
And how much sleep did you get?
I finished last night just about 1 o'clock, and I drive half an hour home from the unit, and then I was woken up again at 6 with a call out. So
that's
less than 4.5 hours.
4.5 hours. Oh, you must be so tired, poor you. Everyone appreciates what you do, though, Jenny, and good luck as the cleanup continues.
Thank you.
Yeah, there you go. Don't they work hard? Jenny Parks, the SES Deputy Unit Commander for Warringah Pittwater, which was one of the worst hit places last night. But yeah, lots of damage right across Sydney Metro and, yeah, indeed the state. It's currently 22 minutes past 4 here on ABC Radio Sydney. Coming up, finance.
ABC Listen.
So tell me, what's the question that people ask the most on the Dr. Karl podcast?
Everything in the entire universe, from haematology to biology to geology. Was there really a big bang? What happens when I have dark urine in the toilet? And finally, why is the sky blue?
But mainly just farts.
Lots of farts.
Dr. Karl and Dr. Lucy have all the answers on the Dr. Karl podcast. Find it on the ABC Listen app.
22 past 4. And Ian Verinder is here, our ABC Business Editor. Good afternoon.
Good day, Richard.
Yeah, the market down again today.
Yeah, down about 0.3%, but we actually opened up quite heavily down. It was not quite 1% down, but it was getting close to that. That followed some fairly heavy falls on Wall Street overnight, down more than 2%, and the tech stocks bore the brunt of that overnight. Confidence again being rattled by, well, are we going to have a recession, or are interest rates going to go higher, or are we going to get both? Mm-hmm. And so it's there's a lot of, I guess, confusion about what the future holds. But
don't mention the word stagflation, Ian.
No,
come on.
And look, it wasn't helped as well by some data that came out last night from US authorities, where there was a record decline in US home sales. So it just kind of illustrates that, in fact, it was the 12th straight decline. So
is that about rising interest rates in the States?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so it's that same kind of, I guess, confusion we're going through here. What does the future hold, and how much further can they push interest rates?
Now, Domino's Pizza had a huge drop in share price today. Why was that?
Well, look, there was within that fall that we had today, there was some really quite dramatic differences. Domino's was far and away the biggest loser today, down 24%. So a huge drop in the Domino's share price today. They released their profit results. They weren't as good as expected. They sliced the dividend, if you can excuse the pun.
Oh, gosh. You've been working that one up.
Oh, look, I think it's been used a fair bit today. And look, sales really underperformed. They like to get a 3 to 6% growth in their sales, and they were well down on that. So the market didn't like it one bit and really dumped them. Origin, on the other hand, the big energy company, that was up around about 13%, primarily because there was a massive takeover bid launched last year by a Canadian group, Brookfield, and an American private equity firm, about $18 billion worth. When the federal government stepped in to regulate gas prices, a lot of people in the market thought this is the end, right? They're going to pull the plug on the whole deal. Anyway, they came out today and reaffirmed the deal. They have dropped the price from $9 down to $8.90, so they haven't dropped it by very much at all.
So all the sky is falling, the sky is falling, people. Yeah, maybe overdid it a bit. These wages growth figures are out today.
Well, now which particular spin would you like on the wages growth? Because we can do one or the other. We can say wages are now growing at the fastest pace in a decade, or we can say the opposite and say it's the largest decline in real wages on record.
Oh, okay, because the inflation rate is so high that
That's right.
even a bit of wages growth is a big gap. Yeah.
So look, wages for the quarter grew 3.3%, up only slightly from the previous quarter, from 3.2. But when you take into account that we've got inflation at 7.8, well, then you've got a real wage decline of around 4.5%. So a lot of workers are really taken in the neck at the moment when it comes to how much money they have to spend, and all the fears about a wages spiral because of rising prices, it really isn't happening at all. And, again, we talked about Coles profit yesterday. Well, today Woolies came out. Now, here you've got Coles yesterday reporting a 14% jump in net profit. Woolworths today, well, their like-for-like sales in terms of profitability up 25% during this period. So both of them have been struck on a 4% rise in revenue. So only a smallish rise in revenue, but this massive jump in profitability.
Okay, so even though they're saying the farmers are charging too much for the potatoes, they're obviously adding an extra profit onto
the
it.
margins are widening quite dramatically. So they've cut costs in a whole range of areas and they've managed to widen margins. Now, Coles put a neat little definition of this. They call it smart selling. Yes.
Very smart.
Yeah, it's very smart.
If you're a Coles shareholder.
Yeah.
Now, the All Ords and the dollar, what were they?
So the All Ords today down about a third of a percent, 7,517. And the dollar quite a bit weaker, down 68.30. And that's because there's a reduced expectation that the Reserve Bank may have to raise rates particularly hard, given that the wages data came in softer than expected.
Okay. Good on you, Ian. There's Ian Verandar, our ABC business editor. Let's check the latest traffic.
ABC Radio Sydney traffic.
Jeff Wallace is here for the Australian Traffic Network. Good afternoon.
Afternoon, Richard. In the mountains, earlier serious crash blocking westbound the Great Western Highway, Wentworth Falls. Now they've reopened one eastbound lane near Lura Mall. And Carlingford, a person's been knocked down on Penn Hills Road, northbound Carlingford Road. I'm seeing the back of the queue coming past Jenkins Road up towards Marsden Road. Commonwealth Parkway, very slow. Fox Valley Road up towards Penn Hills Road. And the M2, very slow from North Ryde, heading out towards Penn Hills Road and the M7. I'm Jeff Wallace, the Australian Traffic Network.
Jeff, thank you very much. Coming up, the news headlines.
ABC Radio Sydney.
Evenings with Indira Naidu.
Hey Indira, how are you?
I
Welcome.
am so well, thank you. I'm so excited to be with you on evenings. I just want to pack in a lot of fun, and you'll be very happy to know that we're continuing with the iconic quiz.
Hi Indira, welcome to the quiz.
Thanks. You are going to get a fridge magnet.
Yeah, I'm a winner already. Evenings with Indira Naidu.
Weeknights from 7.
ABC Radio Sydney.
Some news headlines. Adam Story, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Richard. The State Emergency Service says there's been more than 800 calls for help across New South Wales due to severe thunderstorms that hit overnight and this morning. The hardest hit areas were Sydney, the Hunter region, the Central West and the Southern Tablelands. The first home buyback offers have been made for flood-affected residents in the state's north. The Northern Rivers Reconstruction Corporation says it wants to make offers to at least 250 residents by the end of April. The Prime Minister has sought to reassure Australians with average super balances they would not be the focus of a potential overhaul of super tax concessions. The opposition leader Peter Dutton says changes to tax concessions will create uncertainty for people looking to invest in their retirement. And Russian leader Vladimir Putin isn't ruling out meeting China's top diplomat this week as US concerns mount that Beijing might provide Moscow military support for the war in Ukraine. More ABC News at 5 o'clock.
Thank you very much. We'll have the day in politics in just a second. We have a few interesting texts coming in. We're talking particularly about these caffeine-based drinks like Prime is the one that's having really heavy marketing from these social influencers who are out here in the country at the moment. It's apparently costs something like $15 a can and has the caffeine level 6 times a can of Coca-Cola. So it's incredibly caffeinated, and parents have been writing in about how enthusiastic their kids are. Often, 13, 14-year-old kids are about this product. One listener said their kids were lining up at 6 a.m. outside Woolworths, so anxious that